Oh, Lord.
Up and down.
That's bar school. Oh, I suppose. Whatever.
I've been there. I've been there.
Why? Oh.
Gotta stand up while you talk.
I may be up here. I may be up here for a while. I don't know. For those of you, unfortunately, that don't know me, my name is Mike Rogers. I am a perennial resident of Eden Prairie. It's only been 71 years, but you know, you gotta stay where you gotta stay. You can't get away. It's just the way it is. Farming in Eden Prairie has changed so much that I can't even believe it in my years. From from being 15, 16 all the way through to I still get to play once in a while, and it's amazing.
Mike, closer to the mic a little, thank you.
I'm gonna turn the thing up a little louder or something. Maybe. We'll figure it out. I don't want it, but I will. My great grandfather, John Rogers, which is what the listed as his name as, came here in 1898. He came to Eden Prairie after 2 years of traveling. He was from St. Louis. He actually was living in St. Louis. He went through Wisconsin, Canada, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and ended up in Eden Prairie, as the family story goes, on his last dime, looking for work. And he stopped at the Schmeidel Farm, which is up off of the crosstown in Indian Chief, where Indian Chief Road meets there now, and was looking for a job. And they sent him down to Charles Hulbert. Charles Hulbert lived across the road from the Moore Douglas house. So that's how he got started. He came that afternoon, they fed him supper, he slept that night there, and they started working for him the next morning. And he was in Eden Prairie till the day he died. And he he was able over the years to be somewhat of a polite term wheeler dealer. He rented land all around Eden Prairie, did a lot of garden cropping, which is what some of my coworkers are really into. And actually his greatest one is that he actually farmed down in the Minnesota River Valley, which I'm sure I'll let Stevie talk about the River Valley and what happens over there, down there for years, but his main crop was celery. Because right next to the Indian camps, they got the Indians to help them hold celery, so to keep the weeds out all this time. So they also say that when he needed supplies, the Indians would take him in the canoe across the Minnesota River so he could get supplies over to Shakopee. So I always thought that was kind of an interesting deal. He then married Matilda Melcher, and they lived in Carver County. They were on the northeast corner of Carver County, which is about where Crosstown and 101 come together. They would be on the west side there, is where their farm originally was. They moved on. After John and Matilda got married, they lived on the Fife Farm, which was on the south side of Duck Lake. Then they went back and stayed some time at the Fife Farm because her dad died and took care of some stuff for a year or two. Then came along, first of all, my grandfather came along in 1900, and then his younger brother came along in 1902, and he had sort of some lung problems, so they moved to the Moore Douglas house. And Mrs. Douglas helped take care of the boys. Both my grandfather and his brother used to live upstairs in the house, and my great-grandma and grandpa, they lived in what was called the Klein house, which is basically where the funeral home is now. And they lived there for a long, long time. And he was always very cognizant of how nice it was to work for Mrs. Douglas because it was really easy. He ran her whole farm and everything, plus everything else he did. And when I say he was a wheeler dealer, he used to dabble in cows, horses, hay, grain, just about anything he could sell. And the great story about him is that, actually there's two funny stories about him. One was when he used to haul all his vegetables down to the Minneapolis co-op down there to sell. And he had a couple ladies come up to him one day, and they wanted that their box of raspberries for only a quarter, but there was a 50-cent mark on that bad thing. He said, "No," he says, "I'd really like to sell you that for a quarter, but you know, Matilda needs a new winter coat this year. And he says, I just can't do it. They paid the 50 cents. And the other one is rather humorous too, is he said he sold a horse to a gentleman one day, and the guy brought it back the next day and said, John, you sold me a blind horse.
Blind?
Blind horse. Blind. And my great-grandfather looked at him and he said, well, I told you he wasn't much of a looker. So you know where I get some of my smart arguments from Picha. So as we want to go along, my great-grandfather John bought the Geisler farm, which is, I don't know if anybody remember where the apple orchard was down there?
Yeah.
Okay, that was the farm that I grew up on. And he bought that in, like I said, in 1904. He put $2,000 down on 100 and some odd acres, paid him $1,000 every year for the next 13 years. I have all the paperwork for that, which is really cool. And so that farm, that's when he was working for Mrs. Douglas, that's how he got into the dairy side of everything. So now here's a guy that's running a dairy farm for this lady. He's also doing crop stuff all over Eden Prairie, in the river bottoms, everywhere else. Now he's bought a farm of his own. Okay? Well, if he wasn't busy enough yet, then 2 years later, he bought what was been listed in some of the information as the Drayson farm, which is just west of Marshall's Corner, Marshall Market. Okay, just to the west of there, about where Rogers Road is in there. That's where he bought that farm, and we called it the Drayson farm. And as I was telling somebody a little earlier here, the family owned, just before and through the Depression, owned a great majority of the roadways of down Pioneer Trail from the corner and all the way down to down to what's now Stable Path, used to be Dell Road. And so we had quite a bit of spread there. And then one of the ladies that couldn't be here tonight is Carrie Marshall, and she lives, or her family, it was just south of our farm. And my dad and her best friends for their whole lives. So I'm sorry she had some problems that she couldn't make it tonight, but she's just a lovely lady and a lovely family. I love them all. So yeah. And they took over the corner, because that was known as Harry's Corner for years, from the time I could hear to the time Marshall's took it over. And so that's kind of an interesting thing, how a family passes things from one to another as it goes. Grandpa got those farms running, got everything going. My grandfather was the firstborn for my great-grandfather. So they started moving farms. And I could spend an hour telling you how they switched farms over the years and who went where and why and how and this and that, over the other thing, it isn't worth it. That's for my family history and not for tonight. We're talking farming. So you have to imagine that back in those days, everything was done by horses. My great-grandfather started one of the first milk routes here in town. Well, that sounds kind of funny, a milk route, yeah, oh geez, you just put that on a truck, you drive over there, it's no big deal. No. This was all a big cart, and big horses, and big, heavy milk cans. And those two horses, that he was part of his team, they hauled that milk down to 28th and Nicollet in Minneapolis, to Northland Creamery, every day. There's an article in one of it's called the Hennepin Review. There's an article about my great-grandfather who basically had gotten fed up with the railroad, because the railroad couldn't get anything done for him. So he said, if the railroad with government subsidies can't run on time, and we only missed 2 days all last year that we couldn't get the milk to the creamery, he said they should tear up those rails, melt them down, and make cotter pins for flippers. And if you don't know what a flipper is, talk about jalopy, whatever you want to call it. That's what they were. So we had there was a lot of things going on. So for me now, it's interesting because when I started to grow up, my dad and his twin brother took over the farm. Their older brother John took over the farm across the road. So they were all three of those were together. My uncle, my dad's twin brother, went to the service. Came out of the service, he didn't want anything to do with farming anymore because he had been around the world. And so that's okay for him. And then Dad started to have a hernia problem, so farming was not in the long term for our family. And so in 1956, he had to sell the dairy herd. And I got the poster from the day they had the sale. And it was a sad day, I'm sure. So I didn't grow up in the dairy farm industry, but my grandfather on my mother's side was full dairy. A couple of his daughters families were full into dairy, so I got plenty of that as I grew up also. But we ended up doing mostly straight cropping. Dad went to work for the school system, the custodian, drove bus, all that sort of stuff, because it was a whole lot easier on him. And so then, when I came along, and then after, we only did straight cropping. I mean, we basically originally raised only corn and oats. When Mom got rid of the chicken and the egg, she built the egg route. My mother every Thursday would haul 96 dozen eggs
Oh my God.
to Minneapolis. Yeah. You can imagine how many eggs I got to sand over my lifetime. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so when she got rid of the chicken route, or the egg route, then we didn't raise oats anymore. We went over to soybeans like everybody else is at that time of the farming. But when I started out, we had one tractor, an old Farm All M, 25 horse. Every spring, you had to disc the field, you had to drag the field, and you had to plant the field. You just,
That's right.
my buddy over there is just nodding because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. So we went, I helped out with all that until I got into the dragging. That I didn't do very well at. Plowing I could do very well in the fall, and the disking I could do because you knew where you went. Dragging was kind of interesting because you did an oddball loop on the field, and then you had to figure out how to come back on the other sides of that. And it just got too much for me. I couldn't quite figure out all that. He wouldn't let me go in straight lines, but so we did that. We did hay. When we got rid of our dairy cattle, my dad found a guy that actually had a milking parlor on 88th and Portland in Bloomington. He had a farm with milk cows, and the milk cows never left the barn. But his yearlings and everything would come out in the spring, and I got $50 a month to feed them every night, to pay them every night. So I thought it was rich. I really thought it was rich. It was horrible. And so we kind of moved on from there. Farming went then. We also, when his cattle were there and our cattle, because we were raising beef cattle, we also had to fill silos, which I don't know if you've ever heard anything about them, but you had to, at the time, before my time, they used to shuck corn, not shuck corn. What other word am I thinking about? Binding corn. And they would cut it off, put it in a binder, and then they would bind a whole bunch, just like you see at the markets now during the fall and all that sort of stuff. But they did it with corn that wasn't quite ripe yet, because that then got ground up, blown up into the silos. My grandfather told the story that one day they had a brand new silo and they were filling it for the first time. They chopped corn, they ground it up because the blower actually had the grinder on it. They did it for a whole day, and they never went higher than one door because it settles. So there was always a lot of work involved with that. But so as time progresses, you can see the different things as to where things have happened. I started out with a 25 horse farm haul tractor. Got to go to a 50 horse 400 baby. That was something cool then. It had neat stuff on it. Now I get to run it on occasion. I don't get to always. On occasion, I get to run a 550 horse Case Steiger.
Oh my.
Before we used to have a 3 or 4 bottom plow, depending on how the ground would pull. Now they cultivate 40 feet at a time. We did 6 feet probably. So it's just amazing. And it's funny, even after all these years, you still got to have somebody that's got some semblance of smarts there to take care of it. Because I will tell a story. There's kind of a certain farmer in my family that's still farming, bought a brand new planter rig this year, new tractor, new planter. Everything was going great the first day. Took me back to his home place that night. I was going to go over to the new field the next morning. Got over there at 8 o'clock. He's going to get a lot done today. gonna work. And it wouldn't work. He tried this, he tried that, he tried this, still didn't work. Had to call the maintenance guys out. So I gotta pay for that too. Got out there, they're looking at everything. They can't figure it out either. We don't know what the heck's going on. We got all the switches in the right places, everything's going wonderful. What's going on here? He said to the mechanic, he said, it's gonna be the dumbest thing you can think of by the time we figure it out, isn't it? He said, yep, it will be. Well, it turns out you can't plant field unless you turn the GPS on the tractor on. One switch. He spent 4.5 hours trying to figure that one out. But he got it planted, everybody's fine. But like I said, it's changed a lot. We've gone into the world of unbelievable. I was with him the other day planting soybeans, and he plants 24 rows at a time. Okay? And in the cab, it shows you all the fields are all marked GPS all the way around, knows where he's going. Tractor takes him right where he's supposed to go. Doesn't have to hardly do anything, you just gotta watch it and make sure you still don't run into anything. But it's just amazing because he's got 24 rows, he's got 24 little lights in the line, and they show all the seeds going in. And if one doesn't go right, it turns a different color, and then he goes, watch it comes back or whatever. And then it's also on pressure in the ground, on how deep everything is planted. Everything's gonna be a certain depth. So it's amazing. It's amazing what it's been. It's amazing where it's gone. And I would not have traded my lifetime in what I was able to learn and to be able to see. I think back at my other grandfather's house, I actually remember thrashing. You know, it was unbelievable. I mean, what you had to do in order to keep things going and stuff like that. So it's just been real interesting. So enough. Let's see you go.
I'm Terry Picha. I'll keep it a little shorter. Okay, a lot of you I've seen here in the last 2 weeks out at the Picha Heritage Farm for our annual plant sale. And this is our 25th year we've had this plant sale up at our farm. And it's a little larger this year than normal, and I'm glad a lot of you showed up. Okay, our farming is a little different than some of like Mike's. We were fruit and vegetable farmers from the beginning. And when my great-grandfather and great-grandmother came from the Czech Republic, well, it wasn't the Czech Republic then, it was probably the Habsburg Empire. There's a lot of people that were related to us that came and settled in the area, northern Eden Prairie, eastern, I guess it would be east, or maybe western Minnetonka, and southern Hopkins area. Dave Pavelka was one of them. And now Dave has spoken here a number of times, and I was really fortunate because Dave was the head of the Czech Genealogical Society for many years, and he lined me up with somebody in the Czech Republic to take our family on a tour of our original place. Yeah, and okay, so I was kind of curious to see where they really came from and why they came to where they did, because our farms weren't good farms. They were hilly, rocky, gravel clay. You really had trouble growing anything. And so we go to the home site, the original home site where my great-great-grandparents came from, Borova, that's what it is now, Borova in the Czech Republic. And if you close your eyes and open them, you don't know the difference between Eden Prairie and here. And so just because they had poor farms there, they decided we want poor farms here also. And so they created a lot of work for themselves. And so, I mean, I grew up on the vegetable farm. I worked with my dad and my Uncle Al. A lot of you probably know my Uncle Al. He was a member of the society for many years. And worked with my cousins, and we grew apples, we grew tomatoes, raspberries. That was our big crop, apples, tomatoes, raspberries, and melons. And it still kind of is. But the interesting thing about me, farming was never my #1 job. I always had another job. And it started, after I got out of college, I worked for the Bloomington Park Department for about 6 years. And then I taught at Hannibal Tech College. I taught the landscape program there for 11 years. And in the process, I'm telling all these kids, as I'm teaching them what you can do in landscape and how successful you can be, I figured, well, if I'm telling them this, let me see how I can do. And so in 1988, that's when my dad passed away. So I had to do something. I had to either decide to keep the farm and keep it going, or else sell it and go another route. So I decided, it's owned by me and my brother, and my brother's in another state, and he really didn't participate, so I had to either do it myself or it would have to go. So I wanted to keep it because I always liked the farm. We never made much money at it. I don't know why I liked it. It was always just a lot of work. But I figured, okay, let's do things differently. But let's not do things the way they've been done. So we changed a lot what we do, and one was we grow different crops. And one of them is flowers, ornamental flowers. And then also I have a nursery that's out in Norwich, America. So we grow trees and shrubs out there and bring them here to Eden Prairie. So in the process, I got a landscape company going, and we did a lot of 20-some years of landscaping work with our own material, and it turned out really good. Part of it, while I was teaching, I also worked for the State Department of Agriculture, and I would license commercial pesticide operators. And so we'd go to different places in the state, hold these seminars and all this and that. And I remember spending a lot of time up in Thief River Falls, up there at the Northland Community College there, and got to know a lot of these farmers up there and some of the people. And eventually I kind of figured, I like this area. Big, wide open fields, sandy, but good farming up there. So I ended up buying a farm up there. And it's a long ways away, it's 5.5 hours. But it turned out to be quite good, a good experience, because I could buy it when they had this wheat rust up there. Farmers were bailing out. They were selling land for like $500 an acre, which was really decent land. And this was like 20 years ago, not that long ago. So I bought in, and at the right time. So I still have a lot of fields up there, and I do a lot of my work up there instead of here. But I kept the family farm, 5.5 acres. We do ornamental work. We do some raspberries, some tomatoes, that type of thing. It's basically me, my wife, my son Rob, and then I've got my daughters Terry and Tabby, and then some of my relatives. They help too. So it's kind of small. It isn't a big deal. But some of you that have been out there, you see what we have. We got 10 big greenhouses, and we produce a lot of stuff. So that's kind of my story, and I just didn't want to get rid of the farm, even though it wasn't something that I could live on, and I always knew that. So I had to do these other things. And I'm glad I did. It worked out really good, and we still have the farm.
Yeah.
So that's about it.
Once a farmer, always a farmer.
You're working.
My name is Sever Peterson. I'm also a farmer here in Eden Prairie, and as were my ancestors, like the Rogers and Terry's ancestors. And as I look around the room here, I see some other names, Nesbitt's right here, Dorncampers over here. Are there any other past farm families here? Okay, but as many of us know, depending on which area of Eden Prairie we are from, the Kerbers were a family from up by Chanhassen, and the Skronkas, and certainly the Nesbitts in eastern Eden Prairie, and the Tuckies. Your family married into the Tucky family, and it was over just just east of us here, a mile and a half from right here where we are. But this was a farm community, and it's interesting that we never had a downtown. Right. It was always a township, and it's almost baffling yet today, but some very nice ways. But anyway, I also am here tonight with my wife Sharon. Our farm wouldn't exist yet today if it weren't for my wife Sharon, and it wouldn't have made it to Sharon if it were not for my sister, also here tonight as part of the program. And our daughter is here tonight also, and wouldn't have made it. I remember a story. We had a sweet corn stand up on what we called the old Northup King farm. Yeah. Anybody that's been here for 60 years knows where the Northup King farm was. And we had a sweet corn stand there and a sweet corn field behind it. And we had a bad storm one day, and that gazebo collapsed. And I was up there looking over this pile, and the television news came by and wanted to take a picture of this. And our daughter Brooke was with me. And so they wanted me kind of down by the gazebo mess, and Brooke was sitting on my knee, and I was talking about her also, and that she was 5 years old, and she began to nudge on me and said, "Dad, I'm not 5, I'm 6." She wasn't shy about getting it right. And we were thankful for that. But there's someone in the room here that was very much, as our daughter even knew, my sister knew, my wife knew, and that's the wife of my brother. And my brother passed away last August, and there's not a day that goes by that one of us, all of us, don't think of him, especially on the farm. Anything on the farm. We still have Lowell's garage on the farm, and thank goodness that he kept things running. If we had something that would run and we wanted it to run, Lowell was our man, and we miss him very much. But the point of this is that people, as Mike has talked about and Terry's talked about, the people in our lives, your family's still involved, and you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today, was it not? And also, our family would not be doing what we're doing today. And it's not just for farmers, it's true for all of us. And so it's a wonderful thing to have family. But I want to go back. Mike talked about the Schmeidel farm, and Nell Schmeidel, who wrote a book here about Eden Prairie, was a schoolmate of my dad, and off the Schmeidel farm, and John Rogers was a dear friend of well, everybody were dear friends in Eden Prairie, and I think all of us that still know each other, as new neighbors come, they become dear friends, and it's a wonderful capacity that we human beings have. And I remember as a young man thrashing on the Dorncamper farm, which lay just north of my aunt and uncle. That was my dad's oldest sister. It was the Erickson farm, and that was just south of the Dorncamper farm. And those two people, the Dorncampers and that was Erickson, the Erickson farm, those two families were involved in that thrashing crew. In other words, there'd be a half a dozen farmers or so. There were two Jakes brothers involved, one of them Elaine Jakes and Jerome, her husband, up on Riley Lake, which is now, what's that called, Bear Path? That was the Jake farm, and then Jerome's brother was just over across 101 in Chaska. These farms had to be close together because the thrashing machine would go from farm to farm, and it was on steel wheels, and it was pulled by horses or tractor in my day, but we still had some horses. I don't remember who had the horses. And I know they did over on the Jakes farm in Chanhassen, because I remember those Jakes boys, the last night of thrashing, just about everybody had dairy cows. So somebody had to go home and take care of the dairy. But the boys, the young boys, if they were around, I always remember, and I tell them this story, and they're no longer alive, but I remember them getting under the horse to see if they could lift that horse off the ground. And I don't mean on their hands and knees, I mean like this. They were serious about it. They were very serious about trying to lift that horse off. I never saw them lift the horse. Anyway, but those were special memories of the time, and of course, the women were very much involved in those thrashing crews, and the meals that the thrashing crews had are legendary and to this day, and so those are wonderful memories. And you don't remember it, but do your family also thrash with thrashing machines?
We still had one in the yard.
You still have
Years,
one?
the steel wheels, the whole thing. And we would, I was around when Dad and the whole crew and Stan would go off into a field and do that. And we then, my mother and my aunt often would join, and we'd have these huge meals because they either got the kids up and down the road or other farmers came over. We had a couple from Bloomington who would come over, and then they would borrow our equipment.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's what you used to do. You used to come in and borrow equipment once in a while.
Well,
And vice versa.
and I remember your dad had called my dad, and they both were thrashing, they weren't thrashing, they were combining at that time.
Okay.
And in those days, I was young, we did not have a very big combine, and neither did the Nesbits.
No,
There were,
we did the
I mean,
soybean.
maybe as big as today, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a contest how big a combine. They were just beginning to have self-propelled machines.
Right.
And I think we may have had a self-propelled combine. In fact, I don't remember that we ever went away from home with our pull-type combine, so it was self-propelled. But I don't know who else was there. There was not just the Nesbits, but somebody else was there helping combine. And I thought it was for the Tucky farm.
It could have been, or what about Holosic? But
For
they were-
Holosic? No, we weren't combining Holosic,
But the
but
Tucky
George
farm
had
would have
a
been-
big combine
yes.
because he got that combine from Truby Brown. Okay.
Which is close to
He got that
Tucky.
that was a big combine, but that was in my high school days. He got
Yeah,
that combine from
yeah,
Truby
yeah.
Brown.
Ours was fairly small, and our combine was fairly small, wide enough to make a dent, but not big like what you eventually ended up having. And so we did, I believe soybean is what we used the combine for. And then we also did corn with the combine. So it was a lot of work, and alfalfa, and horse hay, and oats. Yeah.
And the Nesbits were two brothers that farmed together as well. Your dad, your uncle.
Yep.
And your uncle was the father of a classmate of mine, Pat Nesbit, then married a Mackite. We were both at Callister, and I could see that coming. But anyway, but people helped each other in those days, and not that they wouldn't today, but the machines, as Mike was saying, the machines are not comparable. I'm not saying that it's a good thing today, because I heard Terry say, there wasn't that much money in it. And I can also say the same. I wanted to stand up and say, well said, Terry. I mean, exactly right. But there were some, I'm going to say, some opportunities in the vegetable business, and I think even maybe a few more in the flower business, especially when you worked as hard as Picha did at it, or the Marshalls was another family we have not mentioned here today, certainly part of this local area here, and this family right here, the Phipps farm. And the Clark farm down below the bluff. We haven't talked about the Clark farm, and they've been going a long time. But boy, they had 5,000 sheep on that farm at one
Yes.
time. 5,000 sheep. Tom Clark was very much of an operator. But he was in our neighborhood, so we could talk about him and say, oh man, he's really an operator. Or at least I got that feeling about it. But the Clark farm and so on. But I say these things just to give you a little background and how much I enjoyed. I can remember, did you have a breezeway on the north side of the house? Was there where we would have eaten when we would be thrashing at your home? Do you remember, Virginia?
I didn't have any breezeway, no.
Okay, well, I don't remember.
When they saved it, they took off everything, they did it way back to 1930. Now, horses are on the other side of the bridge.
Did you say the horses came from across the bridge?
No.
Pass her the microphone.
That's,
You take the microphone. We want to hear it, Virginia.
no, the horses are still there if you drive down. Paul Vogel's. We're right at the end of Pioneer Trail. Okay, if you go straight down here, straight down, if you cross the bridge, you're in Carver County. If you go down a little bit further, you're in Scott County.
Yes.
So it's all kind of together. We had a lot of hired men. I'm an only child, we won't go into all the particulars on that. But anyhow, so we had all these people that we bring out to help also. And you really had to cook a lot. I mean, these guys, they're out early in the morning and it just keeps keeps going, and by noon it's all gone.
They're hungry.
Yeah. Well, we had 1,800 chickens. 1,800, I cleaned all these. With vinegar on a dish towel.
Oh.
And then my mother counted on an old coffee can thing that my dad cut a little hole in the top, put a light bulb in.
Oh, yeah.
So every one of them, and then they went straight into a great big egg case, and then we drove them to Peterson's Dairy in Hopkins. We were getting good prices for eggs, but not quite what they got.
Not quite.
I totally agree with him. It was, I'm coming on 84, and to me, I've had a blessed life, being a farmer's daughter.
Hold it close, Virginia.
I'm like him, I'm coming, well, you're not 84 yet. He rode the school bus with me, but I was bus patrol, I got out late.
You gotta hold it close, I can't even.
No, it's a joy wherever you are. Family's very big, no matter where you go in the world. Family is the big thing. But I didn't want to keep the farm like Terry. And so I went to business college and was going to be an accountant. Well, so I got out of this area, and for 38 years I was out of Minnesota, and then I came back after my dad died because of my mom, and then my mom died. And then they decided, the guy that bought the property, which he's talking about, where Erickson's were down below and then Door Kemper's were closer to Pioneer, right on Pioneer. It's, when I found out they were gonna save the house, you know, it was sort of like a shock. Because my mom had been born in the house in 1910, and she'd lived there basically all her life except for a couple of years when we were on one where I am now, where my dad developed the land, Crestwood Terrace. We were right next door to Mike Rogers' dad and mom's house. That's where I live now, except they don't live there anymore, they're up in heaven and with my folks. His great-grandpa, John Rogers, who he talked about, who came over from England. Mike is younger than me, and his father, Roland, was older than me. So I was kind of like in the middle. What happened is, and this happened in so many places all over the country, my mother's mother and her husband were good friends of John Rogers and his wife, Matilda. And what happened, each one of them lost a spouse and then they married each other. So the bottom line, I was a little kid who went to the market when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I was going down, he was my grandpa, literally. He was literally not a blood grandpa, but my other grandpa I never met. He was already dead before I was born. And my other grandpa was up north, who saw me when I was 4, and I never met him either. So I mean, Mike's grandpa was my grandpa.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course I got spoiled.
And Brooke is Sever's daughter, and talk about how they're keeping things going with the Sever, Peterson Farms.
Great. They wrapped me into this, invite me here and then my name is Brooke, and excuse me, as of now, my parents are still involved as much as they want to be, and my dad's still planting and busy. It keeps them young. I'm really happy that they're still doing what they're doing. And then my brother Aaron and his wife Nicola and my husband Mitch, who married into the family, they are running the farm. And they run the Fall Festival in Shakopee. And Aaron is doing some hemp, and we're just kind of expanding where we can, and everyone's doing their own interests on the side, and yeah, it's great. And my husband came into the picture a little over 20 years ago. He started working there actually in high school, and was the best friend of my older brother, so things were a little strange at first, but he came and knocked on the door to hang out with my brother, and then it's like, nope, I'm here to watch a movie with your sister. And then the business partnership happened after that.
Yes,
What
yes.
can we do? What can we do to preserve the family farm?
What can we do to
Preserve the family
preserve the
farm.
family farm? Okay, we'll come to that question in a moment.
Big
Remind me.
companies are buying out everything.
Remind me to come to that, because it's a perfect question. And it's the elephant in the room. Okay? I want to come, well, that isn't true, but I want to wrap up here. I don't want to keep it too late. But, you know, I want to talk about Brooke's husband and our daughter-in-law. You know, all of us, Terry, myself, and the Nesbitts and the Marshalls, we've been lucky to still be farming here, and the Rogers and so on. And many of us, especially if we have vegetables or flowers, you can't do it all yourself. You need family, and you may need other people. In our case, the man that became our son-in-law started working. He was a good friend of our son Aaron, so he started working on the farm. And I can say to Brooke, and we love to say this, that Sharon and I were in love with him before. And that's true. They weren't dating. She was dating someone else, he was dating someone else, and those both fizzled out, I guess, or however it happens. We all had some experiences with that, I guess. But our son, his wife, she started working on the farm before she had a driver's license. And so we said to our son that we also in love with her before he was. And it's not a contest or something, we don't need it that way. But it was just some wonderful memories for us. But I can remember she went to St. Ben's and our son went to St. John's. She came home every weekend and helped us at the corn maze. Our son didn't show up. I don't know. I mean, Sharon and I, we weren't on top of that or something. But anyway, we love our in-laws. And as Brooke said, they arrange it so that myself and Sharon can be as involved yet as we want to be on the farm. But, and there was a couple things, and Mike mentioned one of them, I've forgotten it, but it'll maybe occur to me here as we're talking, but I want to come to the question. Was it, how do we keep the family farm? Is that
What can
the
we
question?
do to keep family farm?
Well, I don't think we're going to be successful. And I say that with a hesitation, not with hesitation to say it, but with emphasis after I say it. Because we're not heading that way without vegetables and a family involved, or flowers. I don't know how it's going to last. Paul Rogers' cousin is a large farmer. We heard it. And there's many large farmers. But they might be the last tree to stand. And what kind of a victory will that be? It's not a victory, it's not a contest, it's something more than that. We've talked about it here. Virginia mentioned it, we've all talked about it. Family was involved. In your lives, families involved, friends are involved, important things, the community's involved. You know, one of the questions that Mike asked me is, you know, why we stayed in Eden Prairie. Well, my folks didn't have enough money to leave Eden, not my folks, my grandfolks didn't have enough money to leave Eden Prairie. Terry talks about the hills in the north. We were in the sandburs in the south. And I don't say that with any complaint, that's how it was. But you know, and there were subsistence farms at that point. But circumstances helped some of the families, including ours. I'm not referring to families here, I don't know, they can speak for themselves. But the Dust Bowl years, Mike talked about the river bottles. The Marshall family is another one that raised vegetables here in Eden Prairie, and still do. But they raised them on the river bottles. And the Dust Bowl years, we could have crops there, and my dad, they would send a truck out to South Dakota and they'd park at the creamery. Because when the farmers there would bring their milk into town, they at least had a couple dollars to buy some food for their family before they lost the farm. Terry talked about farmers in northern Minnesota that almost couldn't survive. And it's almost true yet today, coming back to your question. I want to come back to that yet. But, you know, and I'm not complaining, but corn and soybeans and cotton and rice are some of the main crops grown in the world. And if we want to feed the world, I think we need a different system of how to keep the farmers on the farm. And one is that they have to pay them. We don't need government subsidies and assistance. We need it or we won't even exist. But because we have it, other countries can't compete with it. I just came from Ivory Coast in Africa. They can't compete with corn. They're trying to raise corn. They can't compete against subsidized corn from a country like the United States. So I think it needs some thinking on the part of the people. And this room is full of the people. Not all of the people, but a lot of them are right here. And it could start here. But I believe that it's going to be very difficult for farms to continue. Excuse me, I can't even say the words without almost choking. Been a farmer all my life. My dad was a farmer all his life. My son would love to be a farmer. My son-in-law, they love farming. They are farming. But we are not going to keep farmers on the farm. Even, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to pick on the Rogers family at this moment, because it's not picking. It's a large, hard-working, successful farm. But it's difficult even for him. And the farmer has no way to negotiate the price that he sells for. If any of us here started a business together tomorrow, one of the things that we talk about the first day is what we're going to manufacture and how much we're going to sell it for and how much does it cost us to produce it. And we would know those things. But the farmer doesn't know how much he's going to pay. He has no ability to negotiate it. We are dealing with some huge economic powers. And I'm not trying to badmouth them. They ran the business. That's how America developed, that they could run the business. Now you're hearing my point of view. I mean, Terry and Mike and many of you maybe have a much better viewpoint of it. But I'm not saying they did something wrong. But that's how our country developed, and the farmer, the producer, the independent producer, the Marshalls, the Petersons, the Rogers, the Pichas, all of us, we do not have the ability to negotiate a price we get for our product. We don't have an ability to negotiate what we pay for our product. And in answer to your question, how do we preserve the family farm? I don't know the answer. But without the people in this room, such as this room, getting involved and asking that question about the elephant in the room, and it's a worldwide question. It's a worldwide question. And I see it as controlled by huge multinationals, production, and farmers will become the hired man. Nothing wrong with the hired man either. Pat Grill in this house was a hired man. You know, the people that worked on our farm, the hired people on our farm, one's the daughter-in-law, one's the son-in-law. These are important people. Virginia mentioned the people that worked on their farms. Terry, I mean, all of us had experience. These are critical people for our operations. But I don't know the answer to that. But I do not see a happy ending for the family farm unless the citizens, and I don't know who else other than America, can stand up in a way that we have to do that.
Amen.
Let me go a little farther than what he's talking about, because this guy told me many years ago, he said, Mike, he said, I don't know if I can do sweet corn anymore. Because I used to be able to sell it for what I wanted to sell it for. Now, the grocery store comes to me and tells me what they're gonna pay me for it. And that's been a long time. Now, you also think about it, I was thinking about a couple things. You talked about thrashing, and there was one thing. Thrashing is the available, you know what wheat and wheat and oats are? Okay, they're grains, right? And then on top, there's the grain. And the rest is just the shaft, the seed. Thrashing is the availability to take that seed off of that stalk. And there's a great big machine that does that then separates it, puts the good seeds over in the nice little trailer on there, and then it blows all those long stalks into a nice big pile that they make straw out of later. But there was even things about that. But he was talking about community and talking about how communities were so intertwined before and they're not anymore. There's so many more people. It's just the way it is. It's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just the way it is. I remember a story that, who were the two brothers up at the cemetery that you and I were talking about? I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, we were talking about them, and they told me the story of a certain family here in Eden Prairie as part of a thrashing crew. Okay, that was probably one of the most tight-knitted group you'd ever want to have. Was it the thrashing families? They went and didn't quite get finished on a certain farm that afternoon before they had to all go milking and stuff. They knew they had to come back the next morning. The next morning, they knew they weren't going to get done right around lunchtime, and the wife said, well, I fed them yesterday, I'm not feeding them today. That was the last time that family ever was part of that thrashing crew. They cut them off just like that. Wow. That's what you don't do to your friends. You don't do that sort of thing. Talking about what you talked about, family farms. Problem is that family farms, like CB said, are, I'm sorry, pretty much, it's corporate farms. It's the big farmer. I mean, my cousin does 2,000 acres. That's considered spit in the ocean. He works with people that are doing 8, 10, 12, 14,000 acres every year. But they've got 8 or 10 people working for them continuously. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's just hard. But you have to also think, and when you talked about the price of stuff, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the YouTube, this guy by the name of the Millennial Farmer. He's bragging about, I don't put my money in the bank, I have it right there in those bins. Well, the problem is that today when you put that in the bins, soybeans right now are running about $10 a bushel, okay? Tomorrow, if we can't sell them anywhere, they'll be $8 a bushel, or $6 a bushel. Now, you tell me what kind of a savings account is in that bin. Not much, but that's the thing. My cousin also said, I don't mean to quote him on this or anything, but he made the comment a while back. He said last season, or the last time there was an embargo, the government paid farmers $28 billion for loss. Okay? Well, that's got to come from somewhere and got to go somewhere. I mean, it's just the way things are. But if things don't change, it could be the same thing again. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That's all any of us can do. But like I said, there's just a lot of things. But I go back to the community thing because his parents have been here forever. Most of my family's been here for a long time. Not only were we involved in that, but we were involved in all of the other things in the community. My grandmother was a one-room schoolhouse teacher in the Gould School before she married my grandfather.
She taught my mother.
Taught her mother, yeah. I mean, that's how this community was. I mean, it just was. For me and my dad. Well, okay, my dad and his twin brother, Norbert and Norman, right? Okay? Norman was the one that said, I don't want to be doing the farming stuff no more. I'm come back, I'm good, whatever. Both of those individuals talking about their communities were both charter members of their separate fire departments, one in Minnetonka, one in Eden Prairie. Now that takes a commitment by somebody to do that sort of stuff. And both of them did 20 years. I won't brag, I did 32. But I was just not smart enough to quit, that was my whole problem. But anyway, I enjoyed it too much. I enjoyed that horse sort of thing. Should we let her go home?
Let him go home.
Okay.
Okay, here's one more thing that we're not talking about. The USDA does a lot of surveys and they do a lot of asking about farming and then they make charts. Okay, when you look at the USDA figures, US Department of Agriculture figures on what is a farm, what's a small farm, what's a large farm. Okay, they consider a small farm anybody that makes $1,000 or more. You have to make $1,000 at least to qualify. To be a big farm, you have to make $250,000. Okay, so when you divide up the subsidies, and there's billions of dollars worth of subsidies going from the government to the farms. Okay, the big farms get about 95% of the subsidies. The little ones, there's like 85% of the farms in the country that are small family farms, still yet today. But they get just a fraction to none of that. And that's one of the real problems right there. It's a political thing.
Oh, wow.
Where do you sell your flowers? How do you?
Well, okay, our flowers, we've been at it for quite a while. So I'm connected with a lot of landscapers.
Okay.
We do the Eden Prairie parks, we do the Minnetonka parks. We sell at our plant sale, which is really a big deal. And we sell at the Minneapolis Farmers Market. And I just want to bring this up. When I was a little kid, when I'd go to the Minneapolis Farmers Market with my grandfather or my uncle or my dad, the majority of the farmers at that market were from the southwest suburbs, from Minnetonka, Hopkins, Eden Prairie, right here. I'm the only one now left. I'm the only one at the Minneapolis Farmers Market from this western suburb that's still active. Yeah, and that's interesting because in the 60s, times changed in Eden Prairie. That was the biggest change in my lifetime. Farmers started bailing out. They started selling because prices were good, pretty good for them. And the farms were lost, except for a few foolish people like me that decided I want to stay. But I liked what I did. And money never was the driving force in my life. I was just as happy when I had nothing. And I really mean it. So that wasn't going to drive me. And I'm really glad my dad didn't sell everything. He kept like 5.5 acres, and that's where I have my 10 greenhouses. But I have a big farm up there in Thief River Falls too. I do it with partners. So I know what it is. I mean, we get the subsidies there, but we don't get it here. And that's the problem.
We gotta go home.
There it is.
We gotta go home.
You guys have kept the farm going because you love it and you found new ways to still be a farmer. The corn maze, that was a huge change for you, and then having your land, your family land, and of course you as a wonderful fireman. He was the first one to our fire.
I saved your
I'll
cat.
never forget that.
Yeah, they scratched the hell out of me though.
Never been outside. But anyway, they're just wonderful people that we have in our community. We're so lucky, and we're so lucky we still have you farming too. That we still have that, and it's really special. It really is. My grandpa he grew up on a farm where the Burnsville Shopping Center is today. And in World War II, everyone had to go to, fight. And they had to, auction everything off. And, so my grandpa always talked about that. And he started a gas station and delivered oil to the farmers so that he could stay with the farmers. That was a big thing. And he talked about knowing Pappy Grill because he delivered oil out here. That's kind of a cool thing. Another kind of fun thing I just have to share really quick about my daughter actually lives in a farmhouse in Chaska that was his mother's farm where she grew up.
Yeah.
And so we just realized that.
Yeah.
And that was really a fun thing.
I go there, but I haven't gotten there.
Yes, we'll get you there.
I know.
But thank you, everybody.
Yep,
Please,
thank you.
please stick around, and if you want to tour upstairs or you want to chat some more beverages or food, please help yourself. And we really appreciate your show up tonight. It's wonderful. And aren't you glad you're in a brick house?
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.